Hello, everyone, and welcome to History's Lunch. My name is Drew Gardner with the two Mississippi Museums, and we are glad to have everybody with us today. We're in our home, the Craig H. Neilsen Auditorium in the Museum of Mississippi History and the Mississippi Civil Rights Museum. We're also streaming live on both Facebook and YouTube, where all of our previous History's Lunch programs are available to watch at any time. So I highly recommend, if you haven't gone to MDH Video, go check out some of those previous programs that we've had. We've had a lot of great ones this year in 2025, and a lot of great ones to go all the way back to February of 2018 that are recorded. We hope that you will consider joining us for the kickoff of your fall with a month-long scavenger hunt at the Eudora Welty House and Garden. Kids and kids at heart are invited to go on the Ghost in the Garden scavenger hunt throughout the month of October. Visitors can pick up a scavenger hunt sheet at the Little Free Library and explore the Welty Garden to discover fun facts about plants along with friendly ghosts. Once you complete your form, you can return it to the gift shop for a special treat from the Eudora Welty House and Garden team the week of Halloween. So if you're looking for something fun to do, I encourage you to go check it out. It's a fun little scavenger hunt they've got over there. But today we are really excited to welcome two friends of History's Lunch, two individuals that I learned today met at History's Lunch, and it's because of History's Lunch that was kind of the spark and the catalyst to today's program. But we're thankful to have Ellen Fentress and Rita Boone and their presentation today of Mississippi's Legacy of School Desegregation. Ellen is a writer and a journalist who focuses on Deep South politics and culture. In 2019, she launched the Admissions Project, an online forum publishing first-person post-integration accounts on contributors' school experience during desegregation in Mississippi. Rita is a native of Utica, Mississippi. She integrated Crystal Springs Attendance Center, now Crystal Springs High School, in 1968. And graduated in 1970. As a graduate of Alcorn State University, Boone served as an elementary school teacher for more than 30 years before retiring in 2006. So please help me welcome first Ellen Fentress, and then we'll hear from Rita Boone after that. So please give Ellen and a round of applause.
Yeah, that was like, it's so Mississippi that Rita and I met because we had come to a History is Lunch when the book, Just Trying to Have School, was an account of school superintendents in Mississippi in the first year of court-ordered school desegregation, of their accounts of just trying to keep things going at that time. And we sat by each other. I think it's a real Mississippi story. I think so many Mississippi stories, it's because we're so small, there's just everything is on a first-person level, and so that's how we connected. All right, so we're going to start here. They said if I mess it up too badly, they'll come rescue me. Okay, yeah. Man, do we all have work to do on reframing history? I know the history I was taught growing up and just accepted as truth, most of it I've had to rework in my head. And I think some of the school stories are certainly, they're so key to all of us, and it's American history. So I think they, most of all, can need reframing and to question what we thought we knew. So we're going to start here just with Brown v. Board of Education. And I think most people in the United States would say, oh, that's when schools integrated. And, we know it wasn't in Mississippi, but it was certainly the whole South had been waiting for this decision, and here it came. And this is how it was reported in the Clarion Ledger. At that time, the theme of the newspaper was fighting any kind of a civil rights progress. State seeks answer to adverse ruling on school segregation. And then the Citizens Council. Within weeks of the Brown decision, the Citizens Council formed in Mississippi. And we all know the Harding-Carter's definition of the Citizens Council. It was white businessmen that said they were going to use nonviolent means to resist civil rights progress in any way they could. But it turned out it was not nonviolent because it instigated and it just added to the tenor of the times. But so this was their publication. It's funny when you go back and do research, some of the really high quality, they had a lot of money, and their things can be much more high quality. When you look at the WLBT footage from some of the things in the 1950s and 60s, the Citizens Council footage was much higher production quality than WLBT. So Citizens Council was formed within days of weeks of Brown, and its main thing was about torpedoing school desegregation and what they could do to stop it from ever happening. So this is a very interesting story from Prince Edward County, Virginia. So there's a wonderful book, and one of the first essayists for the site. You know, the site has stories from any southern state. We welcome stories, and I have one of the first ones there was from the author of a book who participated in the school system there. Her name is Kristen Green, and the name of her book is Something Must Be Done About Prince Edward County. They closed the schools. You know, they just closed the schools. For 5 years, there was no public school in Prince Edward County, Virginia. And the white students, they built an academy for them, and they went there. And the black students had to some people never went back to school. And some went they found someone, a relative, and went in another school district. And also, interestingly, a man who worked for the newspaper there has come through Jackson with a book he's done. It was the first example of reparations in the U.S. that the Virginia legislature authorized, in a bipartisan vote, authorized reparations for people damaged by this, and they got that later on. So, okay, time for the rescue. Oh, okay, there it is. Okay. All right, here we go. Citizens Council. They're just the reason for being is to do anything to stop school desegregation. This is if you ever want to go down a rabbit hole, the Ole Miss Library has the complete Citizens Council monthly magazine online, and you can see it. So that's where I'd gotten this. This is from one of their national conventions in Chattanooga. Anybody read, Harper Lee's, that final book, Go Set a Watchman, and everybody was so disturbed at Atticus and finding out he wasn't just the enlightened person that he'd been portrayed in To Kill a Mockingbird. If you remember, a lot of people were shocked, and they were talking about this group. Well, she says it's the Citizens Council. Anyone in Mississippi that reads it knows exactly the group he was in. I'm doing something wrong. I don't have the touch. Okay, this is just some of the things that talk about relearning history. This is what was in the Citizens Council magazine. Throughout the South now, there are thousands of children in need, white children, whose government is denying them the education they must have. White children whose bones, in a sense, are being twisted. My goodness, and this is what was being fed to the South. So this is more of that. All right, so in 1964, they dedicated an entire issue of the Citizens Council magazine to how to start a private school in your town. And the first one was in Jackson, over in Fondren. This is a group from Jackson that went to the Citizens Council, that convention in Chattanooga, to talk. They were members of the first Citizens Council school in Jackson, which I understand was that You Are Not Alone building, right by Pig and Pine in Jackson. All right, and look at this. This one blows me away. Students tell why they prefer private schools. If anybody in Jackson knows anybody who went to that school, I'd love to talk to them. I've sent out a couple of emails just out of the blue, and I haven't been able to reach anyone. All right, I've just added this part to it after talking to Rita, and you'll be hearing her story. But, all right, so people think 1954, that's when schools desegregated. There were a few districts that just went ahead and voluntarily desegregated, including Washington, D.C., but most did not. In 1964, a decade after Brown, only 2.3% of black students in the South were in predominantly white schools. So, and one of the reasons for the stall is districts trying to have freedom of choice. Anybody here? I remember this from when I was in school. Freedom of choice was, lots of districts said, okay, we are not going to change any of the attendance district policies, but anyone can go to any school. At the end of the school year, we'll get a form, and if any black student or any white students chooses to go out of their assigned school to another school, that's great. So, you know, the onus was totally on black students to go without any kind of systemic support into a white school, as Rita will tell you how that worked. And so, but these are some of the legal notices for freedom of choice. And then, so freedom of choice, that's just, it wasn't satisfactory. There was no systemic effort and so it was struck down by the courts in 1968, 1 year before Alexander v. Holmes. So this is really the case that integrated Mississippi schools or any district, it was about places in the South. It would apply to the South because it was places with dual school systems, just pronounced white, pronounced black. And the Supreme Court in 1969 said through Alexander, no more delay. So it applied to the 33 school districts in Mississippi, but it would have applied to any school district that was asking for any more time. And what Alexander did was it replaced Brown's ruling of with all deliberate speed for at once. So those of you in school, I remember this was in the fall when I was in 8th grade, and that after Christmas, things had changed. That was when the new district policies had gone into effect, and so many of us were put in private schools then. And I've heard, this wasn't the case in mine in Greenwood, but I've heard some people say their teachers even told them to take your books with you when you go home for Christmas holidays because you can use them in your new academy. So, school integration at once, here we are. This was a big thing. And so many of the academies started. Some of them started a little before. You know, the Citizens Council was talking about it in 1964, and a few of them started, I think, in Indianola and Greenwood earlier. But so many of them started right here, 1969, 1970, at the moment. And you'll look at, these are how many students left the public school system that year. Alabama, 21,000 students disappeared. Louisiana, 11,000. Mississippi, 40,000 students disappeared. Yeah. So, all right, so we get to kind of the current day. And so I went to Pill Academy, and I would hear, when this story came out, if y'all remember when Cindy Hyde-Smith first ran for the Senate, it had come out, she'd gone to Lawrence County Academy, and there was a photo of her as a cheerleader with like their Colonel Rebel right behind her, and it was a local story in the Jackson Free Press, but it was picked up nationally about she had gone to this thing called a segregation academy, and it became national news. And my reaction at that time was like, okay, you know, if you're my age and white, you might have gone to an academy. Is this news? And then I just caught myself. Yes, it's news. And listen to how I've normalized it. I've just over 3 generations in Mississippi, it's just become, I can name all these famous people out of Mississippi, Donna Tartt, Stella Ward, all these people that graduated from segregation academies. But the idea that I had so normalized it, like, yes, it is news. At that point, I decided, well, I wanted to write about it and explore it a little more. I was real grateful. Bitter Southerner published my essay about my own experience going to Pill Academy, and just the disconnect you have in that experience of what a white silo it is, and you just don't think anything, that you get the message, intended or not, that what matters inside your walls is what matters, and outside not so much. So when I published it, I was surprised at the amount of people that contacted me that had gone to academies all over the South, and they had said that they appreciated the story and that they had had that experience and have never known what to do about it. So I decided to start a website. Mississippi Humanities Council was kind enough to give some funding to start a website. The original one was called The Academy Stories, which I thought was a great double entendre. Yes, it was stories of people who had gone to the academies, but also just the stories we tell ourselves by being in an environment like that. And then the following year, okay, Steve, I mean, I think there were 6 essays. One of them by Steve Yarborough, a great Mississippi writer. Kristen Green, I mentioned, from Virginia. A number of them. I would have put that first 6, I would have put it up against Harper's Magazine. I was so honored with the people that were willing to write. And you just can't beat the price they charged for it, which was $0. This was a stunning story by Neely Tucker. He's from Starkville, and he's at Archives, the National Archives now, head of publications. But he had been a foreign correspondent for the Detroit Free Press, written a number of novels and a memoir himself. He was asked back to Starkville Academy to be alum of the year a while back. And he would say, "Are you sure you want me back?" They said, "Oh yeah. Everybody in the 12th grade, they read your memoir." And he said, "Okay." And so he came and he gave his speech, and he just told the truth. He was not a scold, but he was like, "You are getting an insulated view of history here and an insulated view of the world you're going into." And so I don't think they're going to invite him back again. All right, so this is from the admissions project, what it looked like. I had a piece in the Salvation South a couple of summers ago that kind of brought the project up to date. It's a good, I think it's a good update of where we are now. And then, let's see, this is one from Georgia. Interestingly, the academies in Georgia all seem to be named for Revolutionary War heroes. And think back to the academies when you're familiar with them and hear about what their mascot is. A lot of time, all of them have these kind of freedom things, issues about what their mascot is from the times. And then that's one from North Carolina. All right, we've got Brittany Wilson here, is on staff here now. This is her story from being a graduate of Jackson Prep and how that went. And this is one from Greenwood, and this is one from a virologist working in D.C. About going to an academy in South Jackson. This is from someone in my class. This is one of the ones that's most moving to me. Mulgrew Miller, are you familiar with him? He's was one of the great jazz pianists of the U.S., and unfortunately he died in his late 50s. But people in my grade that went to Pillow, we never got to meet him. And the white students that stayed on in public schools got to meet him, who was, clearly the most talented person our age in Greenwood. And to think we were insulated, that's what we were insulated from. So Dr. Salika Sweet, some of y'all probably know Dr. Sweet, that's for her experience at Murrah. I'm really happy that books are starting to use this essays on the site as primary documents of history. And these are 4 books that are quoting essayists on the site. So I'm hoping some of y'all will be interested in telling your stories. I'm really interested particularly in young people, because yes, this is about the repercussions from 1970 school desegregation, but I mean, these stories are being lived right now too. Schools right now are direct results of this, and so many towns still, the academies are there, and they're primarily white schools, and the public schools are primarily black schools, and splitting the resources and just the community spirit between a town. So I'm looking for all generations to tell the stories. And also anyone who knows of any funding source, this is great. We had humanities early on, but that grant is over, and I had a couple of kind people that gave some private donations. It's a nonprofit, iZone Mississippi, through the Community Foundation for Mississippi, but I would love to pay the writers. That everybody has done these with no compensation, and that would be great to get that going. All right, so they are. It's our obligation, I feel like. One of the wonderful things about History is Lunch is the value on history, because you're not a citizen of the world, engaged in the world now, if you don't know the history. And I think our schools show that most of all, with the conversation now about vouchers and coming into the legislative session and school choice, where that leads. After Rita talks a minute, I'm going to talk a little bit more about vouchers. And now we are on to Rita. this. I'm going to do, here we go. Here's your cleaner. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm going to tell my story, maybe a little bit different from which Ellen told hers, but this is my story, my version of my story. So this is truly a surprise to me. I really had no idea that I would ever be asked to speak here to tell about experiencing my story of school of your choice, which we know now was Mississippi's way of integrating the white schools. So in 1968, first, let me talk about these two pictures up here. That's me when I was 6 years old. And the school I attended was called Genline Elementary School. And some of you might have known about that school in Copiah County. It was the mansion that the host clause used to live in. Remember the host clause that found Utica Normal and Industrial School on the Utica campus? So we went to school in that mansion, but I'll talk more about that later on. The next picture is me also. That's when I attended Host Clause High School. It was still in relationship to the host clause where I went to school in the mansion, but I'll talk more about that later on. Okay? So, in 1968, I was just a girl from the Carpenter, Utica, Copiah County area. I wasn't the wife, I wasn't the mother, I wasn't the grandmother, nor was I the retired educator that I am today. And neither did the two Mississippi museums exist. So those are things that were not in existence at that time. It was a different era. And I could not fathom that in the future I'd be invited to speak at my alma mater, which was Utica Junior College, which is a direct descendant of the host clause because he founded what was called Utica Normal and Industrial School, but the name was changed to Utica Junior College over time. Nor would I be honored from Mission First, a ministry of First Baptist Church that's right across the street. Or did I ever know that my picture, this little girl from Utica, from Carpenter, from Copiah County, that her picture would ever be on the internet and my story would ever be on the internet. But time has changed, and we're so grateful for that. The thought of writing my story started in this building. I attended History's lunch presentation. And after the presentation, I had to open my mouth and make some comments. And of all people who were there, Ellen and Fentress. And if all of you know Ellen Ann Fentress, her ears are always attuned to develop a story out of some good material. And she thought what I said was good. So we talked for a while. And so she talked to me about writing my story. So somehow my son was introduced. I introduced my son to Ellen Ann. And they both thought it was a good idea. And the rest is history. I wrote my story. So if you're going to say anything today or have any nice comments, don't let Ellen Ann hear you because you'll be writing a story. Okay? So in 1968, my friends and I had the opportunity, that's when School of Your Choice started, to attend Crystal Springs High School. And at first I said we had the opportunity, but later on I'm going to change it to I, because During that time, across the summer, my friends changed their minds about attending Crystal Springs High School. I guess their parents or someone had told them a- about what it would be like. But knowing my dad, Mr. L.M. Watts from Utica, Mississippi, who had seen some of the world as a military soldier during World War II, had different ideas for me. He said, no, no, you're going to, yes, you're going to attend, but no, in no way was I going to say, no, I'm not going to attend. He over, he what could I say? He overrode my decision and changed it into yes. So can you imagine what kind of time I had across the summer? Just even thinking about, I was not going to be able to attend school with my friends. I was going to be alone. And the summer was not a good summer, not at all. Okay? So in 1968, I did enroll into Crystal Springs High School. And when I stepped into that building, it had polished floors, it had tall ceilings. It was very ornate because it had a Tudor architectural style. It was blended with Tudor and Gothic. And so it was very ornate on the outside. It was a beautiful building. From downtown, you could see that building because it was a grand building. If you looked up the street, that school encompassed the area in which it was sitting on. It had oak trees, it had magnolia trees. It was just a beautiful building. But that building had a lot that was not good lurking on the inside of it for a black student, and in particular for me. Because when I entered that building, I never had any idea that I would be spat upon. Yes, I was spat upon. I was descending the stairs, and someone was going up the stairs or ascending the stairs. And when I knew anything, I was spat down upon. You know, I didn't know who did it. But then I reported it to the principal, but he showed no concern. So, little fragile me, all I could do was cry. And that's what I did. Okay. The previous schools that I attended did not physically compare to Crystal Springs High School. They were not ornate. They did not have tall ceilings. They didn't have polished floors. But instead, we had one room. We used one room in that mansion. We had one teacher for grades 1 through 6. We didn't have any, we didn't have a cafeteria. If we were able to bring a lunch, we brought that lunch. If not, we would be hungry all day. We had a wooden heater to warm us. And did I mention we had an outside toilet? Okay. So at Crystal Springs High School, we had a boundary line, and you know that school had pillars. Let me see if I have a picture of that school here. Oh, that's it. That's the school. That's Crystal Springs High School. And those pillars, you see those pillars near those steps? Though that was our boundary line during lunch. That we knew that that was our station during lunch. We didn't mix all out on the lawn with the other students. And just as that boundary line right there, in the lunchroom, we had an assigned table that spoke a silent message to us. Just let your mind go to work. You can figure out what that silent message said. That, you know, we were assigned to that table. And so there was a silent message. Whew. I'm going to get through this, but it evokes a lot of memories. when I start talking about this, but I'm going to get through it. Okay. Also, at Crystal Springs, in that ornate building, I was kicked by a person, and it wasn't a female, it was a young man. And I weighed 80 pounds or less. I was very thin during that time. But somewhere, God gave me the strength, He just gave me the will to say, I do apologize, but if you kick me again, I will kick you back. God did that for me because I wasn't that kind of person. I wasn't a fighting person. It was just 3 girls of us at home. We didn't fight. We didn't kick. We didn't do anything like that. And so that was something new to me, someone kicking me. We didn't do things like that. But you know, we were at Crystal Springs High School where they weren't supposed to be doing things like that. I was learning something like that from them. Things that I didn't know anything about. But it happened. Okay, my enrollment at Crystal Springs at this school was not just an enrollment, it was a disruption. All I wanted to do was to enroll in school and attend school. But it was a disruption to and a challenge to the system that it worked so hard to keep people like me out, people with my color of skin. They worked so hard to keep us out, as Ellen Ann has just alluded to with the information that she showed a few minutes ago, how to start a private school and things of that nature. She showed us that. Okay? So the world inside Copiah County was a scary place. Can you imagine being 15 years old and walking into a building where you're not wanted, not because of anything that you've done or anything that you've done wrong, but simply because of the color of your skin? I had done nothing wrong. I just wanted to be educated. I wanted an equal education. Things that, if it was good for them, it was good for me. And that's what I wanted. At least I didn't want it. I didn't have knowledge enough to want it. That's what my dad wanted for me. Because he had seen some of the world. And he wanted better for me. And so that's why I was there. But while I was there, I did my best to learn all that I could. I ended up graduating with honors. Even though a lot was done to try to keep me from graduating with honors, I still did it. Thank you. So Copiah County was not ready for us. It was not ready for black students walking into a white school. It wasn't ready for change. It wasn't ready to see black excellence face to face. It was scary. Yes, it was scary. It was lonely. I was isolated. There were only 2 of us in the 10th grade. But did we have any classes together? No. Every effort was made to keep us separated. And we were always separate. We didn't attend any classes together. So my father had high hopes for my education. So he believed in me. I guess in times when I did not believe in myself. And also during that time, black parents believed in the power of education. And my father only had an 8th grade education. And he received some of that education after coming back from the military. Because he continued, to go to school on the Utica, Normal, and Industrial Institute campus started by William Holtzclaw. And he had been drafted into World War II, and he knew what it was like out there in the world. So he had an innate desire to be a force for justice and progress. He was politically minded, and there was no question to whether I finished high school at Crystal Springs High School. It was a done deal. Okay? Also, let me tell you, my father drove the bus for the Copiah County School District. But after I entered Crystal Springs High School, can you imagine what happened to his job? He was fired. Okay, there was 5 of us in the family, and it was hard making it on a bus driver's salary. But after him losing his job, times became even harder. Just imagine, no income. Okay? My father didn't lose his job for doing anything wrong. He didn't lose his job for being just a thief or anything, or for stealing anything. He lost his job for doing the right thing, wanting better for me. That's why he lost his job, because he wanted better for me. Let me ask you this question. How many of us are afraid to stand up for the right thing because we know it might cost us something? You don't have to answer, but just think about that. You don't have to answer. Okay? Let me see if I have any other pictures here. Okay, we'll keep the ornate school up there. Okay. Okay. Also, let me go back. This is where I attended school here. That's after we transferred from Crystal Springs, from Ginline Elementary School. We were transported to, as I said, William Henry Holtzclaw Memorial School. Now, this is that school that we were transported to, and it does not compare to the Crystal Springs High School. But that's what we were transported to. And I guess they thought if we had a building that looked something like that, we would be satisfied. But you're not ever supposed to be satisfied with the status quo. You need to always reach higher. I've been introduced to the term reach for the stars. You have to always try to reach for the stars. Don't just settle for the status quo. And so I think that's what my father had in his mind, that the status quo right there, he wanted more for me. And so that's why I was at the high school. Okay. You might not believe this, but my goal after finishing high school, I wanted to be a model. A model during a model during those times. You all forgive me, but after I think about it, it's sort of funny to me. Because during that time, you didn't want to be anything that wasn't going to guarantee you success. Because if you want to be a model, you had to make it. A team or someone had to hire you. You had to be good enough to make it. But it wasn't something that was practical, something that was guaranteed. The practical jobs are guaranteed. But being a model, that's not something that's practical. But in my mind, that's what I wanted to be. But with my dad losing his job, we needed money for a portfolio. We needed pictures. We needed clothes. We needed makeup. And we just need all kinds of things to get started as a model. And after he lost his job, there was no question to it that dream was killed. So, I think in a way it was a blessing in disguise. It wasn't a blessing, but to my parents, it may have been a blessing because they didn't think it was a good idea for me to venture past Copiah County anyway. They didn't want, they were afraid of what was out there in the world for me, a little girl from Copiah County, a little girl from Utica, a little girl from Utica. They knew that there was a lot of racism in Utica, in Copiah County, and they knew that this racism was widespread, not just in Mississippi, but it was everywhere that killed dreams. This racism quietly killed my dream, and it also we weren't taught to dream big. We weren't taught to dream out of the ordinary, but to dream practically, something that's going to guarantee us a job. So it was all about quietly surviving, as I did for 3 antagonizing years at Crystal Springs High School. Can you imagine being told your dream is too big for the color of your skin? You don't have to answer. But that's what that was telling me. I wasn't dreaming practically. I was dreaming, I had one of those way out in left field dreams that black people weren't supposed to dream like that. Okay, so, excuse me. So, in plotting my life, I had to figure it out on my own since my dream of being a model had been squashed. So the counselor at the high school wasn't as attentive to us as he was the white students. So we didn't have knowledge of Pell Grants. We didn't have knowledge of all the financial aid forms that had to be filled out, and all of the assistance that there was out there for the black students. So, since my dream of becoming a model was put aside, the only practical vocation left for me was to be a teacher. And that's what I became. I became a teacher. Even though I had not filled out those forms, the Lord provided a way for me to get into college. Okay, so with my dad in tow, we ventured to Utica Junior College, and we asked the financial aid. My dad asked the financial aid director to credit my tuition. We had not filled out any forms or anything, but my dad just talked to the counselor, and he said, so the school did. They financed. They credited my tuition. Okay, so the way I paid that tuition back, they gave me a job in the nursery. My main job was to wash dishes, but then I also had to do anything else that they asked me to do. And so that's how I was able to make it through Utica Junior College with the assistance of my dad, and I will never forget the financial aid director's name, Mr. Adam Jenkins, who saw something in me, and they decided to finance my education. Okay, in retrospect, our lives were governed by racism. I experienced racism from the teachers. I experienced racism from the students and the principal while I was attending school at Crystal Springs High School. Okay, our school bus was not allowed to park on the campus where all the other white students were dismissed from the bus. We had to park across the road, on the side of the road, and walk across a busy street in order to enter the campus. Do you know how dangerous that is? Walking across a busy street, cars going to and fro, but that's what we had to do. After I think about that kicking episode that I had with the boy in the classroom, it did a lot for me. It gave me courage. It gave me faith. And it made me realize that God had faith in me, and that I could depend on God's faith, that He was a higher being, bigger than myself, and He helped to carry me through. Because if it had not been for God, black people, we will talk about what God has done for us. God did it for me because I wasn't able to do it on my own. I couldn't have done it by myself. Okay, one day as a grown woman, married, I had been out of town. And when I came back, the machine, you know how we used to have the phone and the answer machine? There was a message on the answer machine. And even though I had been gone over 3.5 decades, that's about 35 years, I had not heard from anyone from the school about class reunions or anything of that nature. But when I picked up the answering machine, well, when I turned it on to see what the message was, it was a lady on there wanting to know if I was Rita Watts that had attended Crystal Springs High School. But she was talking about, she wanted to tell me about a class reunion. You know, listening to that lady, it just brought up all kinds of fury in me, all kinds of ill feelings. I didn't answer her, but this is what I thought about. I could have said, I am Rita Watts, who was spat on. I am Rita Watts, who was kicked. I am Rita Watts, who was referred to as a Negro by our Archie Manning loving history teacher. I was Rita Watts, whose bus had to park on the side of the road and walk across the busy street. I am Rita Watts, who was isolated in the classroom. I am Rita Watts, who had panic attacks at times and could barely breathe. But instead, I just deleted the message. I did not respond. It had been many years since graduation that I attended Crystal Springs High School. And by the way, that's my graduation picture right there. I wasn't prepared for that picture. When I went to school that day, I had my hair in my typical ponytail that I usually would have it in. But the other girl in the 10th grade, well, not in the 10th grade, the other girl that was a senior with me helped me. And you know, there's always someone of the other race who's going to help you some. Everybody's not the same. But they helped me to get my hair like that. Do you see how puffy it is? It wasn't supposed to be puffy like that, but I had not fixed my hair. It was just in a ponytail, and they helped me pull it down. And you can look in my eyes and see all that I had gone through. I had gone through a lot, you all. But you know, if I had to do it again, I would. It was worth it. It was worth it. So in 2019, that was my first time of revisiting Crystal Springs High School, and that was a long time. And when I entered the building, well, first it's not a predominantly white school now. It's predominantly black because all the white students went to Copiah Academy. They are paying for their education when our black race, we're getting ours free. Okay? So upon entering the building, all of those memories just flooded my mind. The fear, the silence, the isolation, and that quiet determination that helped me to make it those 3 years in Crystal Springs High School. Okay, I ascended the stairs, and then I looked into the auditorium, and that CS was still emblazoned on the curtains in the auditorium. The last time I walked those halls, I walked them as a scared teenager. I returned as a grown woman, one that had lived long enough to understand the magnitude of what that girl had done long years ago. And when I look back at those years, I was not aware at the time I was part of breaking new grounds. Now, I realize the impact I had. Thank you.
in the chair. I want to show a few more, but maybe,
Okay.
yeah, sure. Would you not have talked her into doing her essay? If you had, and I do want to say I thank Rita so much. I kind of feel like people in my situation that went to academy, we kind of like, we need to tell our stories because if we don't tell them, they're not going to be told. When you look at the academy websites, none of them say why they were founded. They'll say, 1969 or 1970, and you know what the story is. But we need to tell our stories. But I feel like someone like Rita that went through so much, what an act of generosity to go back and retell that story, because several people that have written them have said that it just brought back issues and pain that they didn't want to think about. And several of the, Ralph Eubanks, Paulette Boudreau, both published authors, they wrote their stories too, and they had said the same. I know Ralph had said that it was cathartic writing his piece. It was so generous to do it. And, but, his family had told him, just put it behind you. And it was a history that he hadn't known what to do with for so long. And I was telling Rita, his family, he only went to Mount Olive High School after Alexander v. Holmes, when integration was systemic. He did not go freedom of choice. His mother said, freedom of choice, freedom to be abused. So they didn't go during that period. All right, so I'm going to finish up here, and then Rita, we're going to talk a minute before y'all come in. So I'm so grateful for Rita for telling her story. A little bit came out of it after she did. Rita's son Marshan had told me how it had opened a can of worms, just going back to that history, as of course it would have. And Rita actually had told me that, well, if something good comes up, maybe it'll be worth it. And look what happened. A few months later, someone reached out to me from Utica College saying they were having Founders Week, and their theme that year was the Women of Utica, and they were trying to reach Rita Watts Boone to be the keynote speaker. And there's Rita giving the keynote for the Founders Weekend. One thing I'm looking for also that we've got to do, we've got to tell the hard stories, but we've got to tell the success stories, because I think that's so important, and they can be as erased as some of the other parts of the story. When you look at history, how many times, the history I learned about Reconstruction in school, about what a terrible time it was, well, no, it wasn't. It was like one of the most, I was just hearing Ta-Nehisi Coates talking on a podcast last week about, it was probably the most, the best vision of democracy we've ever had in America, of some of the progress then. So I think so many times to not tell the success stories and to let people tell stories about what a failure something is, it's like we don't need to do that. And if you look at, here's Lloyd Gray talking about Meridian High School in the time, and it was a success. And Murrah High School. Anybody here from Lines Are Drawn? Yeah. It was a success, but it was like almost like it didn't matter, and about 3% white attrition every year, and then before long, almost all the white students are gone. And then someone could come along at this point and say, well, public schools aren't supported. We're not going to go there. It was almost like to not tell the good stories is a self-defeating, self-fulfilling principle. So if you got a good story, you want to get those and more of those. So I'm proud that we're widening the way history is told. I would love to think about, and maybe we can talk about this in the question and answer, what could be some of the ways what can we do about it now? It's like 3 generations into this in Mississippi now, where so many communities are so polarized between still an academy and a public school. One thing, it was systemic, the resistance. And when the academy started, the legislature gave a $186 voucher to any academy student. And in some of the legal filings from the age, the vouchers were eliminated by the courts in a year or two. But one of the arguments being that a lot of these little academies would never have made it financially, except for that state support for a couple of years until they gained traction. So the academies became and polarized the system with systemic help from the state. So I think if we're going to do anything to bring back public schools in places where they're polarized and change this, it needs to be something systemic besides just people just one-on-one deciding I'm going to do that. I wondered about some economic studies of the towns that have kept very diverse and active public schools, and ones that have not had really an academy take hold into the educational ecosystem. To look at those and to see what the difference is. I know so many of the towns that have academies are not doing well, as far as because if you had a chance of moving to a town and you could choose going to one with a really well-regarded and diverse public school system and one that's split like that, I mean, why would you go there? I've had people, tell me that in some of the Delta towns. Yeah, and it would be interesting to see. I've never had any of the academies reach out to me and want to talk about this anymore. But at least I think a start is talking about your history, and if you want to do better, what you're going to do about it now. But something to think about. I wonder about a foundation. If there's ever is there any town that would okay, we fought it, we did this in 1970. Maybe it was a white-centered integration, and it was not done in particular good faith or just by benign neglect. We want a do-over. I wonder if there's a national foundation that will come into any town and help them do a do-over as far as financing it. One idea I've had is that what about if you did this and some deep pocket came through and said, you know what, you graduate from our public high school, you get a college scholarship. I think I've had people tell me that have children in the academies that they're not wed to the academy. It's just all the white people in their town are doing it, and they didn't want their child to be any different, but they're not wed to it. I think if you had this systemic incentive to go to the public schools, as the state helped back in the 60s to go to a private school, that would get some traction. And I feel like once you got the momentum going, as it was with the academies in the 60s, that maybe that wouldn't even have to be forever for some foundation or deep pocket, or you could back off a little bit on that, but maybe so, I don't know. Just some things to think about. I'd love to know what anyone else thinks about what's an answer now. So this is about the tuition grants for the Mississippi, the 186 back in the day. And the academies would run an ad in the paper showing, say, you can afford it too. You're going to we're charged $500 a year, minus 186. This is going to be $20 or $30 a month for your family. So, I do these workshops sometimes telling this story and ask everybody to think about their own school experience, because your school experience, you lived American history in one way or the other. And I would love to hear any of y'all that your school experience, and possibly you want to write a story too for the site. Is that where we are? So,
yeah, we've got time for a couple of questions. So if folks will raise their hands, we'll hop into the questions.
Yeah.
This is a statement first to Miss Rita. You are truly a great American hero, and we applaud you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
And my question is, did anyone ever contact you and ask for forgiveness? Thank you.
No, not a soul.
I thank the two of you as well. My question is, there's been some documentation that as academies were being started, especially in Sunflower County and in Bolivar County, that equipment and material were transferred by the old all-white school boards to the new academies in order to get them started. I'm wondering, number one, if you are aware or willing to look into that part of the story, and then secondly, the idea of some kind of reparations to those public school districts that had to suffer as a result of what those boards did in transferring property and equipment.
That's interesting. Well, yes, in Inverness, the central, what was it called? It was this, there was the academy there. What was the old public school? They just transferred and gave it to the academy.
Hi, my question is for Miss Ellen Ann. I've in your research, did you find what were the school options for other races besides white or black?
No, not back in the day, and I should have. Well, actually, that's not true. In the Delta, there was a Chinese community, and this is fascinating, that there was a case like Brown v. Board of Education in 1927 to the Supreme Court, and the Chinese community lost. That they upheld Plessy versus Ferguson, and separate but equal was okay. And so then in the Delta, there were conversations about where were the Chinese community going to fit in, and in most times they ended up being with the whites. Yeah, that's a good question, but actually, I think that's what I know from that time frame. It would be different today.
Thank you. First, I want to thank Ms. Rita. Ms. Rita.
Yes, thank you.
Ms. Rita, thank you for your courage. Thank your
you.
family for your courage.
Thank you so much.
And I'll just say, I want to say something, then ask a question. I've been spit in the face also. It is something you carry with you. I don't care how you pray,
Yes,
how you put it off, how you ask for forgiveness.
yes,
You may be all right for a while, then it comes back. And
exactly.
I understand. I'd just like to relate that to you.
Thank
But
you
my
so much.
question is it true that a lot of these academies, or some of these academies, are only surviving because of the black students they bring in to play ball and to get money for the smarter black kids, that they may get money from the government or something of that sort?
Well, I think a lot of the academies, they have a very small black enrollment now and lots of athletes. That's true. Yeah. I think in was it Greenville Christian? Does anyone know the situation in Greenville Christian? Yeah, that's there's a substantial. Is it black majority school now? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm glad you asked about success during this time. One of my favorite stories, and I wish I had time to tell the whole thing, but we're out of time. The Tupelo school system, Lee County, I don't know if y'all are aware of it or not, but there's a small display in the museum here about the process that took place in Tupelo. There was no white flight. There were no private academies. The community leaders got together and decided this is going to be a peaceful process, and they integrated schools without any of what the rest of the systems were going through. My dad was teaching back then, and he was part of that process, and he's always been a hero because of, the stance that he took against a very popular, other way of looking at things. And
but that's like the economic studies, and Tupelo thrived.
I know, and they were already considered a progressive city because they were the first one to get was it TPA? Is that Tombigbee Power Association? The first city to get electricity anyway in Mississippi. And but anyway, when they integrated, it was a very smooth process, and it has stayed that way. The student body now is like 50-50. And it's just according to what I've read, and I was not involved at the time. I was just observing. I'd already graduated from high school, but I was observing what my dad was going through and what the system was going through and what was in the paper and all that, and I had kids about to start school, and they never had any trouble, and they had classrooms with black and white students together that, that's just the way it was. And it worked out fine, and it's still working out fine. So anyway, y'all want to know a success story, dig into Tupelo's story.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to another top of the hour here at History is Lunch. But before we wrap up and give Rita Watts-Boone and Ellen Ann Fentress a round of applause, Ellen, will you just kind of give us a pitch? We have got your memoir here today that folks can purchase a copy and get signed. Many of these stories of your work at the admission Project and Segregation, Seg Academy Stories are in that book. What else can they find in your memoir?
Yeah, my memoir is kind of framed around the idea of, anybody born in this world, you're kind of born into a script of expectations of who your family and your culture thinks you're going to be. And mine is about what was the script I was born into and what was me and where does one end and one begin. And one of the things was all the volunteer work they figure women need to do for free. And I start back, different kind of volunteer jobs. It was not only what I wanted to do, but also what society thought I ought to be doing. But then I end up with the final part of the book is, what I'm going to do? I'm going to do the admissions project. This is something I'm not going to I'm not going to stuff envelopes for somebody. I'm going to do this about something I lived through, and we need to tell these stories. Mm-hmm.
Well, it's an excellent book, so if you'd like to grab a copy, of plenty of copies, and Ellen Ann would be happy to sign it for you guys. Let's give Ellen Ann Fentress and Rita Watts Boone a round of applause again. We hope that you guys will join us again next week for History is Lunch with Sally Wolf King and her presentation on Holly Springs' influence on William Faulkner's fiction. Thank you guys so much. Y'all have a great rest of the day.
But you knocked it.